Hi, folks. I'm Pastor Alex Bruning of First United Methodist Church in Jessup, Iowa, and this is Woman Wednesday. So this is our last Woman Wednesday together for a while because we're going to be doing some other adult discipleship and children and youth things coming up. Some of it's still in the dreaming process, but I'm excited to do that. So today I want to talk a little bit about the book of Esther and a little bit about how Esther relates to our time today. Esther. So, some of you might know the story of Queen Esther, who saved her people from an ethnic cleansing. So, Queen Esther and her uncle Mordecai end up saving the Jewish people from King Ahasuerus and Haman, who kind of set the plot against the Jewish people. But one of the things we don't often talk about or call it what it is how Esther ended up being queen. So in chapter 1 last week, we talked about Queen Vashti, who was Esther's predecessor. And Queen Vashti spoke up for herself and kind of took a stand for women's rights and was then exiled. So they decided that the king needed to find somebody better. So the king sent his men out to all of the kingdom and told them to bring the finest women back, and the finest women would each have one night with the king, and if they found favor with the king, they would then become the king's wife. So essentially, it was human trafficking. Okay. They took these women, these young girls from their homes, their villages, their families, put them in the castle and let them be there for the king. The king got to then choose which young lady he was going to find favor with. And we don't often call it human trafficking. In fact, we kind of ignore that whole story of how Esther became queen and just jump into, you were made for such a time as this. When in reality, I think we need to talk about human trafficking. So some of you know that I'm an advocate with an organization called Dressember, which is a 30-day fashion style challenge to raise awareness to end human trafficking in our lifetime. So I want to talk just a little bit about human trafficking today. There are more than 40 million people in the world who are trafficked right now that are involved in human trafficking. Nearly 1 in 4 are children. Okay, 1 in 4 of those 40 million are children, which is just insane to me. So you're looking at roughly 10 million children that are being trafficked in our world. Human trafficking generates about $150 billion a year. So that's annually. Annually it generates $150 billion a year, which is just a crazy, insane amount of money to me. So, how does trafficking take place? What does trafficking look like? There are several types of human trafficking. They include debt bondage, forced labor, bonded labor, child soldiers, sex trafficking, which is really the one we probably think of the most. But in all reality, sex trafficking is not the biggest trafficking industry that there is. Forced labor is actually the biggest trafficking industry that there is, with 20.2 million persons in forced labor. And then the last one is forced marriage. Forced labor is the biggest. It takes up over 50% of the people who are in modern day slavery, human trafficking. 15 million persons are in forced marriages, and 4.8 million persons are in forced sexual exploitation. Just for kind of a breakdown of what that 40 million people look like. And keep in mind again here that 1 in 4 of them is a child. And 71% of victims of human trafficking are girls and women. 20% are girls and 51% are women. So it's disproportionately that women and children are being trafficked. So this is something that is near and dear to my heart. One of the things that we know is that every state in the United States has people being trafficked in it. So this is not an over there problem or a them problem. It's a world problem. It's an us problem. And we also know that it has pretty much affected every country in the world as well. And there are some really easy things that we can do to help combat this human trafficking. Esther, in Esther's time, she really had no choice. I don't even know as that people really thought of it as wrong then. I mean, we're not told that Esther's outraged or that Mordecai is outraged when Esther is taken. These are not things that we're told. But I'm outraged that Esther was taken because we do know that Esther is a beloved child of God and has dignity and worth in and of herself, and she should be able to fully live into that dignity and worth. When we enslave someone or when somebody is trafficked, we are saying that they are less than. We are saying that their life is not as important as whoever is using them, that the user, the trafficker, the person who buys the products, that their happiness, their well-being is more important than somebody else's. And in all reality, you and I contribute to human trafficking on a daily basis. We probably don't do it intentionally, okay? I don't want you to think like I think we consciously contribute to human trafficking because it's not true. But there are a lot of things we do that we don't even know contribute to human trafficking. For example, cotton, tobacco, and coffee are three of the major products that have been linked to forced labor slavery. Another really big culprit of forced labor slavery is chocolate. And so even paying attention to where you get your coffee from and where you get your chocolate from can really make a difference in ending slavery in our world. Making sure that they're fair trade, that they're coming from ethical sources, that their growers are paid an ethical living wage. All of these things are really easy to do. You can look at the wrapper for the fair trade mark on there. You can ask. So tea is another really big culprit, and I love tea. However, if I go to a new tea shop, the first thing I ask is your tea ethically sourced? Because that matters to me. And I'm not going to buy tea that isn't ethically sourced because I don't want to contribute to human trafficking. So, I mean, those are just common everyday things. I mean, most of us drink a cup of coffee every day. I wish I said I ate chocolate every day, but I don't. But boy, it would be nice to. But those are really easy habits we can change. Now, it's going to cost you a little bit more money to buy fair trade chocolate and to buy fair trade coffee. It is true. But it's costing you more money because the growers and the laborers are getting paid a living wage. It's costing you more money because somebody else is actually able to survive on what you're paying. And to me, that makes it worth it. It makes it worth it that another person is getting a living wage for me to pay extra with that. The other thing I found is that some big companies can't answer that question for you because their employees don't know. I mean, it's a big corporation that employees don't know. But a lot of small local businesses can answer that question for you, and they're excited to answer that question and say, yes, what we have is ethically sourced. So, I mean, that's something that I ask everywhere I go. My favorite coffee shop is Sidecar Coffee. I know their coffee is ethically sourced because I've asked. You don't know if you don't ask. So ask that question. Make sure that they're using ethically sourced coffee beans for your amazing morning latte, because that means that somebody isn't enslaved in order for you to get your wake up jolt, which is super important. So the other thing that is really prevalent, or the other industry that has a lot of forced labor is in the garment industry. So the fashion industry is one of 5 key industries contributing to the prevalence of modern day slavery. $127.7 billion worth of garments include modern slavery in their supply chain. So, I mean, that's just a ton of money that you're looking at right there that modern slavery is contributing to. So garment workers typically earn between 1 to 3% of the retail price of an item of clothing. So that's just crazy to me. 1 to 3% of the item of clothing for all of the work that they do. As a society, we purchase 400% more clothing today than we did just 20 years ago, and this resulting in higher demands on our garment workers, which also contributes to human trafficking. According to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, a living wage is a human right, but the majority of garment workers abroad are making less than half of a living wage. So I know we think of human trafficking, we think of people not getting paid at all, but that's not actually true. These garment workers, they are getting paid in some instances, not all instances, but they're not getting paid enough to live on, less than half of what it would take to live on where they're at. And so they're getting next to nothing. They're being exploited in order for these garments to be made. So something that we can do, again, these are really easy things that we can do, is we can shop fair trade or ethical brands. So make sure that the companies you're buying from have fair trade policies, or at least are working toward that. Dressember has an ethical fashion directory. Totally recommend you check that out so that you can see where are some great companies to buy things from. If you're looking for dresses, every year Dressember sells dresses with their campaign. All of their dresses are ethically sourced. That's what they're fighting for. So if you want a new dress, check out Dressembers. They're also super cute. The other thing you can do is shop at thrift stores or consignment shops. Don't buy new. If we lower the demand for clothing, then we can also work on paying living wages, so we can lower that demand. Thrift stores and consignment shops are great. The majority of the clothes you see me in on a Sunday morning come from a thrift store or a consignment shop. Most of them were even on sale at the thrift store or the consignment shop. Also ask who made my clothes. Asking brands that, holding them accountable is such a big part of this. If we aren't asking, if the consumers aren't asking, aren't fighting back, then they're going to continue to use forced labor because they can make more money. And greed is often the culprit in a lot of these instances. And just buy less. You actually don't need that many outfits. How many outfits do you really wear? How much clothes do you have in your closet that you haven't worn in 6 months? These are some things to think about, especially when we know that so many of our garments are being made by those who are exploited and enslaved. So I mentioned that Dressember has an ethical fashion directory you can check out. There's also an app called Good On You, which is super awesome to help you find those ethical companies as well. Those are some really easy things you can do. Okay, so making sure your coffee, your clothes, and your chocolate are ethically sourced. Super minor things that really don't affect your life that much, but can make a huge impact on the global trafficking industry. So something to think about there as well. Another thing that we should probably touch base on is knowing the signs of human trafficking. Knowing the signs of human trafficking could really help someone. So some of the signs of human trafficking are living with their employer, poor living conditions, signs of physical abuse, no identity documents. So a lot of times the person trafficking them confiscates their identity documents in order to keep them from being able to run away. Tattoos of ownership, essentially a tattoo that's branding them. Submissive or fearful, scripted answers are a big part of it, and few personal belongings. So those are all signs to look for in human trafficking, and it's really easy to report human trafficking. 1-888-373-7888 or humantraffickinghotline.org. You see it on the subway in New York. See something, say something. It's super important. If you see one of these signs, say something. And if you are at a gas station or something, in Iowa, there are signs in the bathroom stalls of almost every gas station that have that human trafficking hotline number. So you could find it right away, even if you see somebody at the gas station who you feel is in danger, to be able to call there and say something right away. I'm trying to think what else to talk about with human trafficking. I feel like I've thrown a lot at you in a short amount of time. But the thing I can say is that human trafficking is definitely something that we can end in our lifetime. It does take some research, first off, takes a willingness to pay more for products. And it takes a willingness to hold people and industries accountable, because that is a really, really big part of it. And there's a lot of care that goes into human trafficking. Not only is it working to end human trafficking, it's working to help survivors of human trafficking, to get them the care they need to help them restore the dignity that is inside of them that has been taken away from them by this heinous act. So there's rescue operations that take place. There's aftercare and counseling, job training. There's also education from the beginning for families. Some families send their daughters not knowing that that's what's going to happen to them, or their sons. Some families get in debt, indebted labor, without realizing that's what's happening. They think somebody's kind of being nice and helping them out, and then they actually end up working for that person for generations upon generations without getting paid. And so there's just this whole world of human trafficking that doesn't seem to touch me most of the time. Like, you know, I'm a upper middle class woman who is pretty financially stable. I have a good financially stable family. I grew up in a good financially stable home. It wasn't something that really affected me, I didn't think, until I started learning about it and researching about it and realizing that the shoes I wore were contributing to human trafficking in the world, or the Hershey bar or Reese's bar I ate was contributing to human trafficking in the world, or the cheap coffee I bought because it was cheap. All of those are contributing to human trafficking in the world. Uh, and my voice can make a difference. My conscious, if I have an ethical conscience when shopping and consuming, that can make a difference in helping end slavery in our world. Esther did something amazing. She did. She saved her people, but she was also trafficked. She was taken away from her uncle, who was her only living relative who cared for her. She wasn't given a choice in the matter. And that still is happening today. These forced marriages are taking place all around the world. We just talked about how that is one of the major impacts, the major industries, I should say, of human trafficking. We looked at the number was 15 million persons in forced marriage, and that's a global estimates of modern slavery statistic there. And in all of these modern slaveries, force and fraud and coercion are used to maintain some type of labor or commercial sex act. And we have the opportunity to stop that. Some of the other things that we know contribute to a greater risk of being trafficked is if a child is homeless or a runaway youth, if they identify as LGBTQ plus, or if they're in foster care. There's a huge link between foster care and human trafficking, which is just so hard for me and horrible for me to think about. But the more we know, the better we can do, the more awareness we can raise. So I guess I was going to talk a lot about Esther this week because originally my plan. Let's dive deep and discover Esther and talk about how great Esther is. But I think that this, with Human Trafficking Awareness Day just having passed, and with the 2020 December campaign coming up in just a few short months, I think this was the perfect time to talk about how we as consumers have to hold companies accountable to make sure that people are getting living wages. The other thing that we have to do is hold people accountable when it comes to sexual ethics. Pornography is a huge trafficking industry. Don't look at pornography. Don't let other people look at pornography. Talk about that with them. Talk about it with your children. They don't know. Talk about it with them. Make it clear you don't pay for sex, that it is about mutual consent in a healthy relationship. These are things that we can educate the next generation on. And there are so many who are out there trying to educate and do this work. So I encourage you to do some research on your own. Make sure you're shopping ethically, whether it be food or clothing or shoes. And if you need a recommendation, talk to me. You can even get ethical glasses made. Prescription glasses, they're ethical glasses companies. Ethical sock companies out there. I mean, everything you can think of, you can find an ethical company that supplies it. It takes more time, costs more money, but it makes a world of difference in freeing God's children. So while we celebrate Esther and her amazing ability to save the Jewish people from ethnic cleansing, we also lament that she was a victim of trafficking. And we lament that there are still so many Esthers in the world who are victims of human trafficking. And we resolve to do something about it. So if you have more questions about human trafficking, talk with me. I'd love to talk to you about it. If you are interested in more ways to get involved in ending human trafficking in our lifetime, reach out to me. Do some research on your own as well. Let me know what you find. If you find a great advocacy group, if you find a great clothing company, whatever it might be, let me know, because sharing resources is how we can make sure we're going to bring an end to human trafficking in our lifetime. So I hope you'll join us Sunday while we actually talk about Esther. Last week we talked about Queen Vashti. This week we are talking about Esther and Mordecai and Haman and King Ahasuerus and all of that. So join us for that. Just a little heads up on a change. We are going to have a parking lot service again this week. Drive-in service tuned to 90.1 FM. I was looking forward to our in-person worship, but with the spike in COVID cases and some concerns from congregants, we want to make sure that we're operating with an abundance of caution to keep everyone safe. And so we're going to stick with the drive-in service this week. I hope to see you there. Bring your backpacks if you're headed back to school, teachers, students, bus drivers, custodians, whoever you might be. Bring your bags, put them in front of your car after you park, and we are going to bless those backpacks this week for this coming school year that is going to be more than challenging, I'm sure. Other announcements, next week we start our new Thursday Thought rotation. So we're going to have Thursday Thoughts 4 weeks in a row over Zoom, discussion based. Next week we are going to start Popcorn and Theology, talking about Groundhog's Day. So this weekend, watch Groundhog's Day so that you can chat about it in Thursday Thoughts and the Film and Faith Popcorn Theology that we're going to have going on. Thank you for being with me over the past 21 weeks as we've done Women Wednesdays. And thank you for sticking with us through this pandemic as well. And remember that we're here for you. If you need anything, we want to be your church. So let's end human trafficking in the name of Queen Esther, who saved her people. Let us save all the Esthers of the world. Amen.